Welcome to the Decide to Move podcast, helping entrepreneurs like you make smart, pivotal shifts in your life and business. Tune in each episode for inspiring stories from brilliant business minds and trailblazers to find out how they made their big moves and how you can too. Now here's your host, author, speaker, business strategist, CEO and founder of Decide to Move, Monica M. Bijou.
Hello, everyone. I am so glad to have you join me for another episode. It is super amazing to have another great guest on the show. And today we're going to teach you how to actually become a guest on a podcast, which I think is super exciting because of the fact that now that the pandemic has happened and people are having to make pivotal shifts, find different ways to get themselves out there, to market, to get known, to show up on scene, and to get their voices heard. Podcasting, I've learned, is one of the best ways to do it. And because I am a podcast host and an owner of a podcast, I have reached so many people across the world that I can't even count on my fingers how many people that I've had on the show just from being in other countries since having my podcast. And so my guest today, Kristin, is going to actually teach you how to actually be a good guest. How do you show up and why being a guest on a podcast is really super important. Hi, Kristin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing so great, Monica. I'm excited to chat with you.
Yeah, me too. I mean, from the day that we met, we connected. So see, this is an example of someone reaching out and being on the show. And it's, I think that we're going to be lifelong connectors because she's super amazing. So can you tell the listeners and those, thank you, those that are viewing us via YouTube about yourself, where are you and what started you on this journey?
Oh gosh, I feel like I'm always tempted to try to truncate the story or tell it in as quick a way as possible. But I'll try to kind of make it quick and saying that I really feel like my journey started with entrepreneurial failure. I feel like I'm not giving a full enough scope of my story without saying that. I quit my last corporate job in late 2014, thought that what it took to be a fantastic employee, which I thought I would be a fantastic entrepreneur. And turns out the transferable skills are very few. I struggled for the first 14 months and then stumbled into the virtual assistant world, which is where I experienced my first level of success. I figured, I wanted to have some freedom of time, but I needed to make some money. And that was the first thing that I did that I was able to do successfully. From there, I really built out a virtual assistant agency, and my journey has really pivoted a few times, just kind of trying to figure out what kind of work I like to do, what kind of company I want to run, all of those things. But today, the evolution is that we have become a podcast booking agency. I love it because I started doing podcast guestings in late 2019. And I did it because I just wanted to share a message with other entrepreneurs that entrepreneurship didn't have to be so hard, and kind of just share, my strategies for working less and making more. And what happened was unexpected, but we started generating leads, and really I started connecting with and generating, I don't even think generating is the right word, but started establishing really amazing relationships with influencers that I had not been able to get into the doors with previously. So this is exclusively what we do, and I live what I preach. I'm constantly pitching myself for podcasts, and I just think that this is a really fun industry. And the cool thing, about 2020 is that it taught me that this is really kind of a pandemic-proof way of growing a business as well.
You're so right with that, because I happened to start my podcast right before they called it a pandemic. And all of a sudden, literally even going through medical concerns, I'm going to say concerns, I'm not going to call struggles and issues, but having multiple surgeries and having to take and step away from certain parts of my business. And then when my podcast, I let a season in and then it's okay, I'm going to take a break for a little bit. I already had interviews. I've already, had a lot of things set up. But when I went back to start getting my seasons going again, I literally had quadrupled my listeners and my followers, and my podcast was there. And it's something where people were able to go to at any time at their convenience, their leisure. And so I always say that being on a podcast definitely allows a person may not hear you the day that you're episode airs. But trust me, it could be months from then when they find you, connect with you. And then so you have this multiple stream of income and connections and people reaching out to you. So I think that's super great.
It's definitely an evergreen strategy, which has appealed to me since I've, pulled back the layers of what I like about this as a marketing strategy. It's an evergreen strategy. It's an SEO strategy. My favorite way to look at it is it being a networking strategy, but you're so right. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that, other things that we're doing in our business, like I'm on LinkedIn. So like posting something on LinkedIn, there's a shorter lifespan of those things that I do there versus podcasts. It's kind of crazy. But if you think about the way that you listen to podcasts, the way that I do is I discover a new podcast and then I go back and I binge. And it's like you go back and find like earlier episodes. And, it just proves the concept of the episodes being evergreen.
Yeah, that's so true. That is so true. And so when you actually what was the thing that really was I would say the nugget, the one thing that said, you know what, I think that podcasting and being a guest, and I want to start making my business focused on this. What was the thing that really made you say, this is the way that I want to go compared to having your VA services and other stuff?
So I'd started praying about like what my niche was supposed to be like a year before I figured it out. I had one niche. We were doing online summits in 2018. I learned a few things from that. I learned that having a niche is amazing. It was the first time I made $100,000. I did it in 10 months and it was like, whoa, having a niche is pivotal. Like this is amazing. But then what I didn't like about online summits is that it was a one-time package. We were in like, high stress time with our entrepreneurs. It just felt like we were hitting the ground with our clients in like this very stressful time. So we started expanding our services again. And I knew as we were expanding services, like, oh my gosh, I'm doing exactly what I know I shouldn't be doing. But, I feel like I need to explore everything to figure out what it is that we want to do. And what really, I guess, sealed the deal for me with being a podcast booking agency is that I started to make a list of all the podcast. Well, I had the list that my VA created for me of all the podcasts I had been on. And then I made a list of all the clients that we had gotten because I had been on podcasts. And then I took the dollar amount that those clients were paying us and I divided it by the number of podcasts that I was on. And I looked at that number and I found that I had made an average of $1,000 for every podcast appearance I had been on. And if I never went on another podcast, that number would continue to grow every single month because we were signing ongoing clients. And I just thought, oh my gosh, like that's amazing. Every time I show up and connect with somebody and I just talk, because, sometimes I say like my zone of genius is talking and connecting with people. So like I can show up and do this thing that I would do for free anyways. And it is generating that much profit and those results for my business. It was like, okay, this makes sense. Let's look at some of our clients. And when we looked at our clients, we were doing some podcast outreach for our existing clients at the time. And when we looked at their numbers, it was like, okay, Kristin, I am not the unicorn here. This is not just, something that I'm doing. This is something we're seeing all of our clients doing. And so it really made sense to niche down in that area because we were able to, start signing clients where we could tell them, look, we can get results for you. This is a results kind of thing. This isn't a clocking hours for us anymore. And it really just made sense. And as I was pivoting to this, I just started to become more and more and more passionate about it because, I get to live and breathe podcasts all day long.
Yeah, and it's great because I know, for me, not only am I a host of podcasting, but I get to be on other people's show as well and connect with people that I wouldn't have never thought about connecting with. And so just even on this side of it, being a host, but then again, being a guest is so much fun. I'm like, I don't mind talking about myself because talking about whatever journey, and it's not like, oh, listen to me, but my story, the things that I've been through and like the stuff that you've shared with me that you've been through helps people connect with you. And it lets them know that, well, hey, if she did it, I can do it too. Like there's nothing special about me to make me be where I am. And so it actually really allows people to actually find out and figure out who the real you is, being able to showcase and just talk for what you like to do. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah, the way that I talk about it, there's like two things that I say, and that is, the know, like, trust factor. We know that everybody needs to develop that in their business, and that's something that happens during podcast conversation. My objective is to really connect with the other host, which you and I, Monica, like, it took no work at all. The first time we talked, we probably could have talked for 5 hours and not been burnt out. We just really connected, which is gold to me. That doesn't always happen, but connecting with the person on the other end, whether it's the host or the host connecting with the guest, either way, like that establishment of that know, like, trust factor really opens up doors to like being referral partners and being affiliate partners and making referrals and just being part of one another's networks. And so I feel like there's so much gold in that when you're focused just on that relationship. But the other thing is that to have a successful business, there's a few layers to like a sales funnel. So you have to attract people, you have to nurture people, you have to sell them, and you have to fulfill on your service. What happens during a podcast conversation is you're attracting a new audience. As a guest, you're attracting that new audience. You're nurturing them by showing up and talking about your methodology and how you do your work and your journey and all that stuff. And then I think most of the time what I see is people then come to me pre-sold because your authority and your credibility is established off the back of the person who invited you on their podcast. So it's like 3 of the 4 stages of a successful business, funnel, and all of it is done in an, half hour to an hour of talking. When I really put those puzzle pieces together, it was like, oh my gosh, this almost feels like too good to be true, but I've seen it be true time and time again.
Yeah. And it's so much fun. You're just going to be yourself. And then it's like, oh, wow, all this happens. And so it actually builds confidence too for the guests, right? When they actually get to be able to see that people do want to hear what I have to say. People do care about what I'm putting out there. It is impacting someone and making a difference in someone's world. And so when that person comes to them and say, hey, I want to work with you because of, I heard you on Monica's show or whatever, it makes a big, huge difference. And it gives you that boost of confidence. Like, oh, I do have things that people want to hear because I'm a part of this program right now where a lot of people, it's like called Beyond TV Boot Camp. And I've heard people like really struggle with their confidence and feel like I don't have it, what I have to say, no one wants to hear, no one cares about what I have to say, or they lack confidence. But being on a podcast allows you, like, you're connecting with, you and I are talking, but eventually when other people get to hear and sit in on our conversation, it becomes golden from there.
Yeah, it really lowers the barriers. And that had actually been one of the things before I started doing podcast guesting that was like, on my radar was like, I'd love to be able to speak on stage. And it was like, okay, that feels a little big. Like that feels a bit weighty. Can I be on podcast as a guest? And, I think that you really should show up and be yourself. And I say to people that get nervous about showing up for a podcast episode, they ask me, what should I do to prepare for the episode? And I say this, like, show up and be yourself and don't talk about things that you can't just organically talk about. Because if you're having to over prepare and talk about things that you can't just talk about that come naturally to you, then you probably shouldn't be talking about them anyways. Like, what are you talking about when you're doing a sales call or a coaching call or talking with your clients in all the different capacities that you talk with them? Those are the same kinds of things that you show up and share. And it does feel just so natural because it is a conversation.
Yeah. And so before we actually get into teaching people strategies of being a guest, one of the things that you're really known for is how is like in podcasting, like one of the ways that you say to work less but earn more. Has that been one of the methods that you have learned that works for you?
Yeah, it has. And I think that the reason that this kind of pulls into alignment with my business philosophies is that People have asked me if I want to be a podcast host, and you can attest to this, Monica, but like being a podcast host is a lot of work. You record the episodes, you have to line up the guests, you have to record the episodes, you have to do the post-production, you have to do all of the promotion and all of that stuff. And, for me, I have found that I'm able to tap into multiple audiences without having the logistical like background stuff going on. So I even think that it's a good strategy for people who have their own podcasts or are looking to launch their own podcasts. In fact, I know a number of people who own podcast production agencies, and they suggest this as part of the launch strategy for the podcast host. So yeah, I have found that this is one of the things that falls in alignment with my work less, make more strategy for sure.
Oh, nice. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, I absolutely love, like, I do my own editing, and it's because I like to, based on where I am in my, like, I am a therapist in the daytime, and then I also have my business at, day and even in the evening. It just depends on the time. So because I'm, military, so I have my active duty stuff and requirements. And then I do like sometimes editing or whatever, but I do it when it's like, it seems like it's not a lot of work for me because my brain is psychologically androgynous. It needs that techie, empathetic world to balance all this, oxytocin happening all day. And it's like, no, I need some tech nerdy stuff happening. And so it's like, it's a win-win for me. Like, so I absolutely love it. However, it is going to get to the point, or it is getting to the point where when next year, when I have a new VA that's coming on, she's going to actually, and they say next year, like this year, I should say, my VA will be taking over that big portion of the editing and different things like that. But I like to do it because it actually allows me to re-listen and reconnect with my guests as well. So that's another reason that I like to do my own edits. But I'm going to end up having to give it to my VA and be like, so it's still kind of close in house. However, I can have somebody else to take on that, and I can just focus on the creativity side of the house. So
that's fun. That's fun though. I mean, you are functioning in the tasks that energize you, which I think is the beauty of being an entrepreneur. And we can decide what we do. We do the things that energize you. I have a 3-year-old, so the things that I can do in my business are less. I have to be very careful about what I say yes to because I have that 3-year-old that demands a lot of my time. But I think it's so important that if there is something in your business that lights you up and energizes you to then take on, other things in your life, those are fantastic things to be doing as entrepreneurs.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, to me, that's golden, and it keeps you happy and keeps you focused on your why. And oftentimes so many people get so stuck and inundated with a little small task that they lose sight and focus of what was the purpose of why they started in the first place. So
that's very true.
Yeah. So are you ready to get into giving people some strategies and tips of how to be how to become a guest, and then how to be a good guest? Because not a lot of people know how to be a good guest.
Yeah, I am. I'm excited to talk to you about this. And, the way that I like to look at this is being a profitable guest, because I think that a good guest means a profitable guest. And if you're going to be doing this as part of your strategy for building your business, you have to be focused on that bottom line. And there are very specific strategies for making that happen. I talk to people that have been guests on podcasts, and they've said I'm not producing anything from this. Why am I not producing? And so specifically, if there's somebody listening that's in that camp, I hope that the information that we share in today's show will help them figure out what's going wrong there.
Most definitely. So I'm going to let you take over and go from there.
So the very first step really is in pitching yourself for podcasts. So for me, I see it in three different stages. One, there's the, finding guests and pitching yourself for their show. Then there's actually showing up on the episode and what needs to be talked about there. And then finally, it has to do with that relationship that happens at the end. And I think that's the easiest way to break this down for people. So the very beginning is making sure that you're writing a really effective pitch and you're finding people who would be interested in having you as a podcast guest. In our research that we do for our clients and the research that we've done for myself in pitching myself, we really want to find people who have alignment and a complementary business philosophy. So like we touched on already, like my mantra is work less, make more. So what kind of other people are out there that have a similar message to what I have that are also being guests on people's podcasts? So, one example is like James Schramko wrote a book called Work Less, Make More. He's a podcast host. He has done lots of guesting. And so one of the first people we looked at is what are all the episodes that James Schramko has showed up on to share his message about work less, make more. Now he teaches like coaching and the operational side and sales of building a business. I, have the same business philosophy, but I provide a totally different service. So I provide podcast booking for people. And then looking at what shows he has been on and then pitching myself in alignment with the same shows that he has been on. So following that influencer route is one of the ways. And then in writing a pitch, I feel like it's really a few things are very important. So one is making sure that you're others focused in everything that you do. There is an element of needing to talk about yourself and talking about some of your accolades, but it has to be done in a very balanced way. Like, are you saying that you have some kind of credibility to showcase how you can provide value? Or are you just saying that you have credibility in a certain way just to say that you have credibility? It all has to tie in together. Otherwise, it just looks like a self-promotional piece. And I figure you could probably talk to this because you have people pitching you for podcasts, like the people that sound like, feature me because I'm amazing. Like, is that somebody that a podcast host really even wants to interview?
Yeah, and I'll actually talk about that. And the way that you had pitched yourself, you actually wrote a nice email that you said, hey, I would love to add this to your show. Here's my idea. Here's some ideas. If this interests you, please let me know. And during that time, I was dealing with some medical stuff. So this is when I was like in between seasons. So I was like, I wasn't looking at any additional podcast interviews or anything else like that. And then when it was time for me to come back, I was like, okay, you're definitely a person that I'm going to reach out to. And then I've had people who send me this long bio, look at my stuff, look at this, but they don't give me anything to say, why should you be on my show? And I've actually had to ask people, so what will make you feel like be a good guest for my audience to want to connect with you? And oftentimes they don't they want to do self-promoting of themselves, which is great, but what are you teaching? Because I like to have my guests learn something. When they're done with an episode, even if it's one great nugget, they learn something. And they couldn't come up with anything. I'm like, probably this show is not for you, and there's nothing wrong with you. I mean, I'm not saying things bad for you, but this one right here is not the connection. So you're absolutely right. It's like having that balance of, yes, you're letting me know that you're credible in this particular arena. And this is why you are able to talk about this topic. However, are you just to talk about yourself, or you're able to teach someone something? And most times they just I've had people that want to talk just about themselves, and I'm lost and confused. Like, so are you just using me as you want to use this as an avenue to promote yourself, but you don't have nothing that you want to offer the audience? and that has been the case. And so you're absolutely right. And the way that you've done it, so I can tell you guys, I'm just going to tell you now, even though she's still in the middle of teaching you, like literally the way that Kristin approached me was amazing. And so anyone who's looking at needing someone to help book them on a podcast, or even align with someone or figure out, definitely connect with her, because she is on the money. So okay, continue. I'm sorry.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. I mean, that means so much to me, because I think that I stumbled upon like the secret formula for writing a pitch, because when I first became a podcast guest, my intent was actually pretty philanthropic. I wasn't trying to get my name out there so much, or like actually be a profitable podcast guest, which is what I definitely now teach. I just wanted to help entrepreneurs be less stressful and know that there was an easier way to grow their business. And so because I was able to come into this with that approach, I was then able to like dissect all of the things that worked for me. And I could see so much of like, yeah, I was focused on helping others. And that kind of like dovetails me into the next point. And that is in your pitch, definitely writing talking points. Podcast hosts are very busy. They don't need another pitch that is just like you're talking about, Monica, like all about me. What a podcast host needs is like, hey, I've basically written a whole episode for you. If this is an episode that you could see would serve your audience well, and you would want, an episode like this, I'm the guest for you. And so essentially the way that I see it is like serving up an episode on a silver platter for the host. This does two things. It shows that you are wanting to add value, but it also ensures that you're able to record an episode that highlights what you do. And that actually is one of the ways to be a profitable podcast guest. So, that's the really like front end of getting on podcasts, but really nicely segues me into being, what you do when you're on a podcast. And so you've written these talking points, the host understands what kinds of things you talk about. And what I tell people is that you really want to give everything that you can away during a podcast episode. Don't do cliffhangers. Don't pretend you're perfect. If there are opportunities to show your failures, if there are opportunities to show case studies, if there are opportunities to literally teach the person listening how to do exactly what you do without you, then you actually have done your job right as a podcast guest. If you think about it this way, the people that I want to hire my company are people that hear me, understand that I know what I'm talking about, but they don't even want to do a DIY. They'd rather just hire me to do the job for them. That's my ideal client. But by providing cliffhangers, I might be attracting people that want to be DIY and they just have a bunch of questions to ask me about, like, can you explain that further? Like those kinds of clients aren't actually my ideal client. So there is zero risk in me literally just telling the audience exactly how to do what I do. So talking myself out of a job, essentially.
I like that because, I actually made that comment earlier today that has been, as a therapist, that's what I always say. My job is to talk myself out of a job. Because at the end of the day, I want you to be able to be self-sufficient. Now, you're coming to me to help you because you don't want to do the work yourself. So you want to have me help you. And as a business coach, same thing. My clients come to me ready and saying, hey, you told me exactly what I need to do, but I really want you to like kind of be that person to help me through it. And so that is so true. Oftentimes you do have people say, well, if I'm constantly going on Facebook and doing lives, or if I'm constantly doing this, I'm giving all of my content away, then I don't have anything to sell. Well, it's different. Just like you can have another person that is a person that books people on podcasts, right? But you guys have different styles. So just because you have two people doing the exact same thing doesn't mean they're going to do it exactly your way. So when people come to you, they're coming to you because of who you are and knowing that you're going to add value to them and their business. And that's what people don't understand. It's not about, because people can Google and get free content all day long, but it's adding that extra layer. And you showcase your personality when you're on a podcast because people already know exactly what they're going to get from you.
You're so right. I mean, we live in a time where there are no secrets. You can read a blog about how to do all the things. You could read a book about how to do all the things. You can watch a YouTube video about how to do all the things. So in business, we are not doing anything secret anymore. But our ideal clients are the people that want us. They realize that bringing somebody else into the fold of their business is what's going to be the thing that takes them to the next level. So I love that. I love this point to just reiterate, like, just tell people, like, just come into these conversations willing to give it all away. That's what really establishes credibility. And I believe that that's why what happens with me and my clients is when people come to us, they're already pre-sold. All the stuff that I'm talking about is like stuff that I would share in like a sales conversation or if I was coaching somebody through something, but I've just shared it for the whole world to hear. This is, I'm not holding back here.
Yeah.
So, show up ready to just give all the information away, give actionable advice. When you can, refer back to what it is that you do. So when I talk to people that say that they've been a guest on people's podcasts before, but it didn't generate any leads for them and it didn't really accumulate into anything for them, what typically is the problem is they're not specific enough on the thing that they sell. So if you are done with a podcast interview and the host thinks you're fantastic, but the host wouldn't even know what you would hire them or you for, like, that you've missed the mark. So, even if, and this was the case when I had the virtual assistant agency, is like, we did a lot of things for people, but how do I succinctly talk about like who is our ideal client and the kind of results that we get for our ideal client? And maybe what is that like introductory offer or that introductory service that you provide for people? You've got to have like a specific point of entry, and you have to know what that is really clearly in your mind so that you can articulate that on the podcast. The example I like to give is, I always feel bad because I'm throwing this person under the bus, it feels like, but I know somebody who's in copywriting and is a fantastic copywriter and has been featured on podcasts. But I remember her telling me, none of the podcast bookings that she had were getting her any clients. And I knew exactly what the problem was because I knew this person. I knew she was a fantastic copywriter, and I would have hired her, but I didn't even know what to hire her for. I didn't know if I was hiring her to write my, social media copy, or if I was writing her to write, emails for me, or if I was hiring her to write sales pages, because she was still figuring that out for herself. So, if you want to be effective as a podcast guest, you've got to figure that out foundationally about your business. What is it that you do? You don't want to leave people confused.
And, and I appreciate you adding that point, because that's one of the questions that I ask people as well. Like when I have them fill out a guest interest form first, and then I do an interest call. And while it does take a little bit more time, to me, it's super important because I want to be very clear, not get them on that podcast and then we're doing the episode and then I'm like, well, this was a waste, right? Because that 15 minutes saves me so much time later. I can, one, know that if we connect very well. Number two, like, know what they have to talk about. If it is going to be of value, if it is going to be something that people want to hear and listen to. And so I will take that extra step any day, because sometimes I have had people that I actually have told, you're not ready. You're not ready for this level of visibility where you don't have anything laid out. You're saying that you're starting a webinar, but on what? You say that you're starting this, but what exactly are you selling? What exactly are you having people